Hi, I'm Tom Rowe, and this is 411 Vids. And today I want to talk about the two movies. For the past 2 years, we've heard a great deal in the news media. I would say 9 out of 10 media outlets that are pretty slanted against President Trump, against his success. They seem to want him to fail, so they promote a false narrative. The false narrative is that President Trump is a white supremacist or a racist, or at the very least, he dog whistles to white supremacists and racists, and that he's evil and a dictator, and that he has to be removed at any cost. So this has spread like a cancer through our society, and it started with a few weeks after his election, and mostly on the left. What most people don't seem to realize is that before Donald Trump ran for president as a Republican, he was most of his life he was a Democrat, and he's still fairly liberal. So this president is fairly liberal. He's been on the right side of a lot of the issues that liberals hold dear. Of course, there's some conservative things that he believes in as well. And I think that the conservatives and some people that were in the middle of the road are the ones who got him in for the most part. Today I just want to focus on one issue, and that issue is that a lot of people seem to have the impression that Donald Trump is racist. Now, the number one thing that comes into mind when you think about this is the Charlottesville event. And that seems to be what a lot of people are holding in their mind as proof, absolute proof. You don't need to look anywhere else, because Charlottesville and what he said after Charlottesville is absolute proof that President Donald Trump is a racist and he supports white supremacists and etc., etc. If you do a search in Google or DuckDuckGo or any of the search engines, you're going to find that your great fear of him being a racist is greatly confirmed. I found lots of evidence in my Google search that Donald Trump supports white supremacists and racists and Nazis. And it all comes from the way that you search. And this is something that I've said in the past, that if you go to Google and you search for something, you are going to find whatever you look for. So let's do a little experiment, and I'm going to bring up my other screen here. This is DuckDuckGo, and I've enlarged it so that we can see the results larger. It'll be easier for you to read at this resolution. What I'm going to search for is find people on both sides. Now, everyone knows that the president said this, and a lot of people believe that because they know he said this, that he was blatantly referring to the fine people who were white supremacists or Nazis. And he didn't say that. He never said that, and you cannot find any evidence that he said that. You can find that in evidence taken out of context by doing a search like this. And so I'm going to prove it to you. Find people on both sides. Search. Okay, so this is really fine, so I'm going to scale it up a little bit so we can read it. So the first thing you see is terrorist attacks on Tumas. Trump plays down threat of white nationalism. Now we scroll down. After 2017 clash between white nationalists and anti-racist protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia. So right at the top of this new search here on March 15th, 2019, you're getting some confirmation bias there. Basically, it's saying this thing that just happened in New Zealand, which is a horrible, horrible tragedy. Everyone agrees that that was awful. Everyone agrees that that was terrible. You won't find anyone who thinks that's okay. I mean, maybe you'll find an extremist somewhere, but it'll be a very rare person that would support that kind of action. It was awful. So we look at this and it says, if we scroll down a little bit, we see our search results. The very first thing we see is from The Atlantic, and the headline is Trump defends white nationalist protesters. Some very fine ... Next one, Trump's comments on white supremacists. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. White supremacists, very fine people. President Donald Trump on Charlottesville, you had very fine. You had very fine people on both sides. This at least is not adding the white supremacists in the same context so that you'll get that planted in your mind. The whole point of this is to hypnotize you. Basically, they are suggesting that when he said you have very fine people or you have fine people on both sides, that he was saying there were fine people who were white supremacists. There were fine people who were racists. They're putting that together for you. They're planting that in your subconscious. Even if they don't ever say that directly, they will put those two things in the context of the same passage so that in your mind you will put them together. So that if anyone asks you point blank, is President Trump supporting white racists or white supremacists, you'll say, of course, I read it on Google. Okay, I read it at The Atlantic. I read it at CNBC. We go down to motherjones.com and we see Trump says there were very fine people on both sides. If we look down here a little bit, we see President refused to blame the violence on white nationalists and Nazis. Okay. We go to CNBC. We see on August 15, 2017, you have some very bad people in that group, but you also have people that were very fine people on both sides. And then above the context is transcript of Donald Trump's jaw-dropping press, blah, blah, blah. Okay, then we have Trump on Charlottesville, blame both sides, Esquire. Trump on Nazi attack, there were very fine people on both sides. Gentlemen, Your President, by Jack Holmes. So obviously Jack Holmes has decided, and he wants you to believe that the president thinks that Nazis and white supremacists have some very fine people among them. We go down, very fine people on both sides. We keep going. Trump lashes out at alt left. ABC News. I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides, etc., etc. At least they're not adding the white supremacists there. So you have to give credit where credit is due. Okay. Very fine people on both sides. If we skim this a little bit, we see no mention of white supremacists. Okay, so they're not implanting that in your mind. Just realize this is psychological. Okay, they're putting things together so that you will have a preconceived notion. That they'll plant that in your mind. It's like putting something with something else. It just psychologically distorts your memory. It gives you a false memory. The false memory is that President Trump said there are fine people who are white supremacists. That's a false memory. That never happened. Okay? And I'm going to prove it to you. If you believe that happened, what you're believing is that this multi-billionaire got up in front of microphones from news outlets all over the world and said in the back of his mind, he made a decision that he thought it would be a good idea to say that there are some white supremacists who are very fine people. That he thought it would be a good idea to say that there were some Nazis who are very fine people. He didn't say that, and that thought never entered his mind because it's not what he believes. And so now we'll continue, and I will prove it to you. Remember what I said, that if whatever you search for is what you're going to find on the internet. So if I look at this fine people on both sides, and I just add a little more, taken out of context. Now we scroll down, we see the full text here at Politico. Of course, all they're going to show you is Trump's comments, white supremacists, very fine people. So the things that they're bringing your attention to, the title, Trump's comments on white supremacists, and in bold, people, fine people. Trump's comments, white supremacists, fine people. It's an implant. It's an implanted memory. He never said that. Okay? ABC News. Charlottesville, fine people on both sides. Now, what's happening here is these, even though I'm looking for taken out of context, you don't see anything about context in these two articles. It's because they're being pushed to the top through some algorithm. Okay, if I keep going a little more, I see something from thehill.com, and it says media couldn't be more blatant in distorting Trump's, okay, out of context. So that should have been the first hit, because in the lead-in information that's given in this article, the words out of context are there, and out of context is in my search result or my search request. So that should have been at the top, but instead they're pushing the same content that I found without those words. Okay, so let's just go in here and take a look at this first article from The Hill. The media couldn't be more blatant in distorting Trump's words on Charlottesville. And if you go to Twitter, if somebody important or famous shares that Trump said white supremacists are very fine people in their and they tweet that, you'll get millions of shares or retweets. Millions. Okay? But here The Hill says the media couldn't be more blatant in distorting Trump's words, and this was written on August 16, 2017, and it only has 10,879 shares. Now you'll probably find this tweeted, on the Twitter, in the Twitterverse, you'll find this tweeted, and but it's not shared as much. They're really pushing the other movie. Okay, this is the movie that a lot of you aren't aware of. This is the movie that's playing, the movie that I'm watching, where I actually watched this conference when it came out, the day it came out. And that was after the media got in an uproar because he said very fine people on both sides, or on every side. And when he said that, everybody got all worked up and said, you hear what the president just said? The president just said there were fine people who are white supremacists. And they planted that in your mind. And then that got shared and retweeted and spread like a virus throughout the internet and the world, and connected that to the president. And it just simply didn't happen. Let's keep reading. I'm going to zoom in on this. Hopefully we'll be able to read it on this limited display. I'll close this video and this ad. Okay, so here we go. Let me pull this up here. All right. There we go. It's better. Okay, so has the media ever so deliberately and consistently misrepresented what a president said? You're really never going to find this kind of animosity toward any other president on either side. No Republican, no Democrat has ever been attacked as thoroughly by 90% of the media, 90% of the time, as this president has been attacked. Okay? It seems, I'm going to read some more. It certainly seems as if the media finally found its proof that President Trump is a racist. Now remember, this was back in 2017, right after all of that hoopla about him saying that. Okay? So this organization produces this article, and it doesn't get shared, and people don't parrot this at all. They just keep repeating the lie. All right? Trump quickly blamed both sides for the conflict. This is from ABC News. Trump quickly blamed both sides for the conflict, adding that there were, quote, very fine people, quote, among both the protesters, which included white supremacists and white nationalists, and the counter-protesters. So they said that his very fine people, in quotes, was representing white supremacists and white nationalists. Okay. Down below it says, I think there is blame on both sides. That's a quote from the president. You look at both sides. I think there is blame on both sides. Trump said today, you had some very bad people in that group. You also had some very fine people on both sides, he added. So they almost told the truth. Right here where they said bad people in that group. They almost told the truth. They didn't quite get to the truth, though. Then it says, this is the Hill, with wall-to-wall news coverage repeating this misreading of Trump's statement, it's not too surprising that politicians from both parties quickly condemned the, quote, very fine people comment. NBC's headline read, Democratic, Republican lawmakers decry Trump's latest Charlottesville remarks. Ohio Governor John Kasich attacked Trump. This is terrible. The President of the United States needs to condemn these kinds of hate groups. The President has to totally condemn this. I agree. And I agreed the day that they started saying he said that. I totally agreed, and I still agree. That's what you should do. When white supremacists march in the street and say horrible things, you should condemn them, right? Okay, it says, does anyone even listen to comments anymore before commenting on them? When it comes to the president, do politicians just take reporters at their word? But Trump never said that the white supremacists and neo-Nazis were, quote, very fine people. He said that there were two different types of people protesting the taking down of Robert E. Lee's statue. The racists, and in parentheses, some very bad people in that group, and people who thought that for the sake of history, it was important not to take down the statue. Here is Trump's own explanation from his press conference. And this is the part, and I hope you'll listen very carefully, especially if you believe that President Trump decided that he was going to tell the world that he supported white supremacists. If you believe that is proof of his being a racist, then you should listen very carefully to the words that he spoke. Okay, this is really critical. Trump. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. So, you have a group of people, and some of them are white nationalists and Nazis. Let's just get them out of there, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists. Okay. And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. So he just said people that do not include the neo-Nazis and white nationalists were treated very unfairly by the press. And then immediately a reporter says, and I remember when this happened because I was dumbfounded by it, because it's got to be Trump derangement syndrome, because how can you hear what he just said in a couple of sentences and still think this? You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly? So after he said, many people in that group other than the neo-Nazis and white nationalists. And the reporter says, so you were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly? Understand what you're saying? Trump says, no. There were people in the rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So there were polite protesters that were protesting against taking down the statue because they didn't think it was right for us to destroy our history, because that's how we debate. We look at these both sides and we say, this is what Robert E. Lee did, this is what Grant did. We do some comparisons and we see who did the wrong things and who did the right things and how we got to where we are today. That's the context that history gives us. But if you start tearing down everything that represents something that bad that happened in our past, then you're removing history. That's I think it's kind of sad. I'm not going to say that Robert E. Lee was a good person and that all his ideas were good, but it's nice to have the perspective of both sides shown so that we can have that debate. I like history. I think we should keep our history and use it and learn from it, because that's how we grow and how we become better people, is by studying the things that happened in the past and through conversation, debate, and analysis deciding where we went wrong and where we went right. That's how we become better people. And you do that in your own life. You look back on the thing you did last week or the thing you did last month or the thing you did when you were 12 and you say, man, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have done that. You look at your own history for perspective so that you can make better decisions in the future. If somebody went into your mind and erased the bad thing that you did, and you look back down the road of your life and you didn't see that you did anything bad, then you might make that mistake again. You might do something because you lack perspective. I think that having that historical perspective is important. But the president wasn't even overtly supporting the statues in those cities. He was saying that's a local issue. If the local government wants to remove those statues, they should do it. That's within their purview. That's something they can do. But there were people quietly protesting or politely protesting that they didn't want the statues torn down, and then there were people very aggressive that were actually physically ripping the statues down. No debate, no decision made through a process, just a riot and a gang doing something they wanted to do without any discussion or debate. So I think it's pretty clear, just by reading a little bit of this, that Trump was taken out of context thousands of times. He never said once that white supremacists or Nazis were fine people. He just never said that. But if you search one way in Google, you're going to find the answer that he did. When you say find people on both sides in your search, you're going to see almost all of the results. You notice the hill is nowhere to be seen here. Okay? and it's all hate. New York Times, Trump, white supremacists, Washington Post, angry mobs, very fine people. See how they're conflating those two things? They're putting them together. They're programming your perception. This is hypnosis, okay? They are doing a very good job of stirring up hatred, because they're only giving you a distorted view of things that are happening in the world. And I think it's important that when you search for something, and in your heart or in your mind you're already thinking, well, that sounds exactly like something Trump would say. If you're thinking that, then that's confirmation bias. So what you're going to do is you're going to go and you're going to search for the bad thing that Trump did. You're not going to add the context of taken out of context or any other words that might show you the other side. And Google and the other search engines are more than happy to give you exactly what you're searching for. But if you're searching for the good side, if you're searching for maybe what he didn't say what they're saying he said, maybe they're taking him out of context, even if you put in the correct search, you'll notice the top results are still the biased, deceptive, outright lying results. And if you take those results and you start spreading them and sharing them and promoting those out of context things to other people, then you're lying. You're spreading a lie, and you're being deceptive just like they are. I think when something happens on the internet, that even if it's somebody that you don't like or that you hate, that you ought to try and give them the benefit of the doubt until you're sure. Don't react emotionally, spontaneously, with a knee-jerk reaction that throws more hate and more vile behavior out into the internet. There's already so much of that out there. I think it's important that we try to be positive. That if there is a way for us to slant something in a positive direction, not positive for an individual, but positive for all of us. Positive in that somebody says hate, 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 and you say, but, I mean, you could even take a character like Gollum or Smeagol, from the Lord of the Rings. When Frodo tells Gandalf that it would have been better that if Bilbo had just killed that creature when he had the chance. Gandalf warns him and says, don't be so ready to hand out life and death, because you don't know what part he's going to play. And it turns out that by the end of that story, which was written by J.R.R. Tolkien, as you know, who was a very devout Christian, he was writing a very deep story about someone who, on the surface, you might think was evil, and inside he was a tormented creature. I'm not saying that Trump is like that, but I am saying that when somebody does something and you just want to lash out with hate, that maybe you ought to hold back. Maybe you ought to do a little more research and see if what's being said about them is true, because you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the person that spreads lies and deception. Wouldn't you rather be the person that spreads love? So there's a lot of positive things going on, and sure, there's some horrible things that are happening in the world, and nobody wants what happened in Christchurch to ever happen. And it's sad that it did. But I still think that we have opportunities every day to choose the light side or the dark side, the good or the evil. You are a tool for one side or the other. Every time you spread something about someone else, you have an opportunity to check yourself, and do some research to make sure that what you are spreading is true. And if you're not sure, and what you're about to spread harms another person, then I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. Maybe I've done it by accident a few times in the past, but I think I've learned, I've grown, I'm hopefully wiser now at 54 years old than I was when I was younger. And I think you should pause and reconsider. And if what you're about to say is uplifting and helpful to someone, then that's, you can't really go wrong there. If somebody that you were trying to help turns out to have deceived you and done something wrong, then all you could say is, well, I was trying to see the good in someone. And that's why I made that mistake. But if you are trying to spread something horrible about someone and you want other people to hate them as much as you do, and that turns out to be a lie, if that turns out to be wrong, then what are you going to say? I was trying to see the evil in someone, but it turned out they weren't as bad as I thought. That's not a very good defense. So I hope that, like me, you will try to find love and good, positive things to say, and try to spread good news rather than bad. So that's all I have to say on this video. I hope it was helpful to you. If you think it was helpful and you'd like to share that, please do. I appreciate it if you'd like this video, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel, so that 411 vids, so that we can get the word out and other people could see the things I'm trying to do here. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.